in this community is decreasing. And for those who are successful, they need that 4-month window. It's taking longer than ever for people to find a place to live. For those with a voucher renting in the private market, they remain vulnerable to rent increases. If a landlord raises rent above the maximum amount we will subsidize, the tenant has to make up that difference or find another place to live. So even the security provided by a deep subsidy is not enough to buffer renters in this crisis. And time is a precious commodity when people are forced to react. The turmoil and fear of this housing emergency shows up in our work every day at Home Forward. And it shows up in my personal life as more and more people are looking to me for answers for loved ones and friends who find themselves in disastrous circumstances, and I rarely have good answers for them. I didn't need to attend the Community Alliance of Tenants Renter State of Emergency to hear more of these stories, but I did, and it was powerful. Commissioner Saltzman, I appreciate that the proposal for increased rental protections was in direct response to what the community has asked for. And I know your staff has worked hard to figure out how to craft something meaningful that works in the face of state preemptions. Thank you. You likely know that Home Forward has a sizable portfolio of apartments that are unsubsidized, where we act more like a traditional landlord, and we do increase rents. We try to do that very thoughtfully, but that rental revenue has to keep the portfolio financially viable, so rent increases are a reality. I want to close my comments today by announcing that we've spoken to CAT about how we can support their voluntary landlord pledge, and with some small caveats, Home Forward will sign on. We hope many others will join us in recognizing that healthy profits can be made while still taking care of our community. Thank you.
A question. How does Home Forward decide how much to put the rent up?
Well, we look at each property individually. Our asset managers are working on developing individual property budgets at this time. And so in many cases, we will have no or small rent increases, and in other circumstances, they may be a little bit bigger. Part of the landlord pledge is that we won't raise rents more than 5% in a year. So for us, a small caveat is the timing of when our budgets take effect. And 5% will be on the high end. So we're doing analysis now to figure out how we can make those impacts as small as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who'd like to be next? Sure, Matt?
Sure, I can go. I'll be fairly brief, just a little bit of historical context. I think these emergency measures are a historical event in our city. I think for the many people in this room and throughout our community that have experienced the trauma of homelessness, and for the many people that have dedicated their lives for just this day. So we thank you for this opportunity to be able to move forward. I think we're really at a great point in our community to be able to do this. Saying that, we've got a long road to go. There are a lot of obstacles that face us. There are a lot of market forces, a lot of industries that won't be happy about the changes that are coming, so it's going to take our collective leadership to be able to do these things in an effective way and to be able to follow through. It's no time to let up on the gas on any of these efforts. So we very much appreciate the opportunity for these emergency measures. We've been calling for a lot of long-term revenue through a lot of different measures. We fully support the short-term rental fees. We support the demolition tax. We support other ways to be able to find opportunities to get permanent revenue towards housing. So I want to say this is a great time, but we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and we've got to do it together. So thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Matt Morris, and I am a part of the Wayfair Minister team at First Congregational UCC Church downtown, just off of Park in Madison. I'm not an expert in policy. I'm actually not even very much of an expert when it comes to the direct work that many of the people in this room have done with our brothers and sisters who live outside and who experience life outside. But I'm here to voice something about the reality of communities of faith in Portland. It's not typically popular in Portland for people to speak about their religious convictions, and that's fine. But for me, acknowledging the dignity of every human being is a strong religious conviction, and that is one that I share with many people who find themselves in communities of faith. This acknowledgement of the reality in Portland, not even the declaration of a state of emergency, but the recognition that there is a state of emergency, that people are on the ground doing the triage work on the streets every day and every night, is extremely valuable. And I know that there are many people in communities of faith who would gladly open their buildings to create these temporary shelters for people, if that was made easier and made possible for them. There are a couple things in my short time that I'd like to acknowledge here. Mayor, you referenced the other drivers of this crisis. And I think it's important, speaking as a person from a religious community, it's important that we acknowledge that there are forces within each of us that drive this forward. The reason that we continue to have these declarations every few years in some way leads me to question whether or not we acknowledge that there are certain core beliefs that we have and hold about the dignity of every person that need to be acknowledged, that no person should sleep outside, that no person should go to bed hungry, and that becomes a strong conviction. We have to be willing to challenge the belief that many of us continue to hold that a person's worth is determined by how much money they have and how many possessions they have and what work is done, where they sit in this room. Our community of faith acknowledges everyone is pretty much on a level playing field here. And the more that each of us can embody that through our own traditions and our own systems of thought and belief, perhaps we won't have to declare this state of emergency in another 3 years. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. So, Dan, do you want to?
No, I mean, if there's any questions, just go.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. So now, Dan, let's turn
Okay.
to the next item, please.
So I wanted to preview the renter protections, and then I have one panel, a second panel, and then we'll go to testimony and amendments. As we've heard, Portland is facing the highest rental increases in the nation. I think in August, our year-over-year rental increase average in Portland was 15%. It was the highest in the nation. So we are continuing to experience very, very low vacancy rates, which is creating the true housing insecurity for many Portland renters. People are getting priced out or otherwise displaced from their neighborhoods. In fact, not a day goes by that my office does not get a call from a Portland renter who receives a large rent increase that they're not sure how they would be able to afford it. Or hear a story of someone who has received a no-cause notice to terminate a home they've lived in for years. Just yesterday, I heard from a woman on a fixed income who's resided in her apartment for more than 8 years, and she received a rent increase notice that will raise her rent 40%, $850 to $1,400. Wow. As I said, she's on a fixed income. Many families are also getting notices to vacate their rental housing within just 30 days. And that's just not enough time for them to find a new place to live, let alone try to keep their kids in the same school, in the same school district. It's clear that Portland renters need help. This ordinance that I'm proposing with the new tenant protections are intended to provide a safety valve for tenants and extend the notice requirements for rent increases and no-cost terminations. Currently, renters who have rented for less than a year receive only 30 days notice of a landlord choice to terminate their tenancy for no cause. The new proposed Portland policy would increase this notice to 90 days. proposed renter protections would also, for the first time, establish a notification time when a landlord raises rents by more than 10% in a 12-month period. And again, that notification will be 90 days advance notice. 30 days is just not enough time to budget for these changes, for exorbitant rent increases that many families are facing. That's why we're proposing 90 days. When the Community Alliance of Tenants first declared a renter state of emergency, it resonated with Portlanders because so many, too many, have been affected by this rental crisis. It resonated with me as the housing commissioner, and I immediately asked our city attorneys to review the proposals that the Community Alliance of Tenants put forward, and found that Oregon law really provides local governments, i.e. us, only to go so far in our own regulations. These two tenant protection measures that I am proposing are based on the Community Alliance of Tenants' original proposals, and also based on the belief of what I, and I believe the city attorney's office, believe we are able to do legally now to help alleviate the housing uncertainty for many. They are not a panacea to our rental crisis, but they are needed now, and we must, as a city council, fast track these renter protections. It is also clear to me that tenants need help to enforce their rights. And the mayor and Chair DeForest's plan to fund homelessness assistance, as I said, will involve the creation of a legal services tenant protection team. And that's a much needed special service that I am very pleased to support, and will do everything I can to get that up and running. And before we move on to public testimony or amendments, I'd like to invite up the following people to give their perspectives, and then we'll open it up. Justin Burry, the Executive Director of the Community Alliance of Tenants, Deborah MC of Multifamily Northwest, and Wayne Stoll, who is a private. I'd like to thank all three of you for being here. I think you're all here.
What's left of us?
Yeah, okay. And I also wanted to, particularly thank Deborah MC, who just finished up serving on 6 years on the Portland Housing Advisory Committee. So she was one of the founding members of PHAP. So thank you for your efforts on behalf of our community. And we'll start with you, Justin.
My name is Justin Burry, Executive Director of the Community Alliance of Tenants, Oregon's only statewide grassroots tenant-led renters' rights organization. With over 1,000 tenant members, our mission is to educate, organize, and empower Oregon renters to demand and obtain safe, stable, and affordable rental housing. Low-income tenants, predominantly low-wage workers, families with children, people living with disabilities, seniors, and people of color are CAT's primary membership base. In Portland and the rest of Oregon, tenants face housing injustice in the form of increasing rents, discrimination, unsafe housing conditions, and the constant threat of retaliation or eviction. Portland is one of the most gentrified cities in the nation and has among the highest rates of rent increases, displacement, and no-cause evictions. Landlords and developers issuing such evictions and dramatically raising rents are forcing responsible and reliable tenants into one of the worst housing markets in our history, without considering the impact on the individual tenants or our community. Portland's unprecedented